thank you for tuning into this update. I'm Joshua Dobi. Appreciate so much you giving us a few minutes of your time as we come to you again, and as I mentioned in previous updates, doing so on a little bit more of a frequent basis now, especially because in this year, 2022, we've had a whole lot more negative volatility than what we have seen here over the last couple of years. So I want to stay in front of you with updates and our thoughts about where we see things and hopefully to provide some value in doing that. Let me go over a couple of big legislative items. Well, one legislative item, one announcement at least at this point. The first legislative item has to do with the piece of legislation which made its way through Congress and was signed by the president called the IRA, or Inflation Reduction Act. Now, I'm not going to speak to whether it's actually going to reduce inflation. Actually, I can tell you mathematically and practically it will not impact inflation here in the near term, perhaps 5 or 10 years out. According to the Congressional Budget Office, there may be some impact on inflation, but it is definitely not capable of impacting inflation here in the near term. But several big items that were associated with it first had to do with the initiatives and incentives inside of the legislation towards green energy kinds of things. Think electric vehicles, think things for your home, actually more energy sensitive kinds of things and incentives that were included inside of that bill to incentivize that kind of behavior. So you're going to see a lot of that. Second big item that was in it was actually infrastructure. Again, may or may not be directly related to inflation reduction, but there were some items in there, not as much as the previous bill iteration, which was called Build Back Better, excuse me for the stumble there, Build Back Better plan, which had a lot of infrastructure. This had a scaled down version, but think railways, think bridges, think roads on a federal level that are going to be improved as a result of this legislation passed. And then the third big item has to do with Medicare, and specifically now the federal government's ability to negotiate directly with Medicare, specifically with regards to prescription drugs. So we'll see how that actually plays out, what it means for Medicare recipients with regards to the amount that they will continue to owe. It looks like there will be a cap out at $2,000 a year in terms of the amount that Medicare recipients will be responsible to pay for prescription drug coverage. So hoping that's the case, certainly for Medicare recipients, but we'll see how that plays out. So I want to make sure you're aware of that. Be staying tuned for additional updates with regards to that as we see it matriculate through the system. Second big item, I call it legislation, it really is an announcement at this point, but it came from the Oval Office with regards to reductions in student loan debt, and specifically canceling between $10,000 and $20,000 of student loan debt on a federal level, meaning federal student loans, not private student loans, if you applied and came within certain income limits. $125,000 a year if you were a single filer on your taxes, $250,000 a year of income if you are a joint filer on your taxes. Now, there's some road to hoe before we actually get to that actually being implemented, including the possibility for legal challenges, the fact that it did not make its way through Congress. We don't know exactly where that's going to land, but it did come from the Oval Office. And certainly they are not careless about the kinds of things that they put out there. So you would assume that this is going to move forward in some way, but nothing's real until it's real, as you know, coming out of Washington, D.C. But because it was announced by the Oval Office, we thought it was important to send an email blast out to you and certainly to make that a part of our update to you here. So if you are one who has federal, not private, unfortunately, private student loans not applicable here, but federal student loans and Pell Grants, then there may be some possibility for you there for between $10,000 and $20,000 of loan forgiveness if you qualify within the income limits. We're going to bring you more details on that in subsequent updates, so please stay tuned for that. We'll certainly bring you the details as we have them. All right, with regards to the markets, I know that's a big point. I've talked with many of you about it. Friends, we're in a bear market. And it's been some time since we've been in a bear market, meaning in terms of the ways in which it moves, the performance of our most popular indexes, and how we're experiencing them. And like I said, it's been a little bit of time since we've been here. As a matter of fact, our most recent 2 iterations of bear markets before this one responded very, very quickly, literally within a couple of months. So we had a sharp turn down and sometimes what we call a V-shaped recovery as far as the market indices are concerned. And we haven't had that here. So we had a sharp drop down in the first 6 months of the year, bottomed out at least at this point as of the time of this update, bottomed out in terms of our indexes there in mid-June, June 16th, I believe was the actual date insofar as the S&P 500 is concerned. And we've popped up a little bit since then, but now we're in this seesaw kind of action where we have some really good days and some not so really good days with regards to market performance. And it very much is acting and moving like a bear market. And that may be a little bit of a different experience. It certainly isn't a pleasurable experience. There are a number of different factors and reasons why that's the case. As I've mentioned in previous updates, we have quite a bit higher interest rates, which is starting to cool off the residential housing market. We also have higher inflation. As a matter of fact, as measured by the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, the highest inflation that we've had here in 40 years. So a very notable amount of inflation right now, which, by the way, sidebar, is also one of the main factors in terms of how the cost of living adjustment to Social Security income is calculated. So for Social Security income recipients, you're going to see an increase in your Social Security income effective in January of between 8 and 9% estimate at this point. In terms of the increase in your Social Security income. It's going to be announced in mid-October by the Social Security Administration, but the preliminary data that we see says that there's going to be a significant increase in the 8 to 9% range. So a little bit of a sidebar. But coming back to inflation and higher interest rates, that's a lot of what's pulsing through the market right now. And as of the time of this recording, we have what's called the Jackson Hole, which is a town in Wyoming. The Jackson Hole Summit, where the Federal Reserve Board of Governors gathers for, I'll call it more of an informal kind of meeting because we don't expect there to be a significant policy announcement in terms of what happens as a result of this meeting, but we do get comments from Chairman of the Board Jerome Powell. We had those today as of the time of this recording, and the market didn't like it all that much. And that happens because we're in this rising interest rate environment and higher inflation. The market is trying to recalibrate, A, what industries and companies are going to do well in that kind of environment, and then B, how much higher are we going to expect interest rates to go as the Federal Reserve Board's way of dampening inflation. And so there seems to be indication that in September, we're going to have, at least as of this point, somewhere between a 50 basis point and 75 basis point, again, increase in the overnight lending rate. Now, what does that mean for you in real terms? That means that interest rates pretty much across the board, not everything and not in a linear fashion, but interest rates across the board are going to continue to increase. Certainly variable rate kinds of things like lines of credit, credit card interest rates, student loan interest rates in many instances are variable. Those are going to be adjusted probably in an upward kind of fashion. So we're going to see those kinds of things happen. We have seen and probably will continue to see mortgage rates on the rise. Now they have flattened out a little bit here over the last 2 to 3 weeks. They may start to rise again, so that's something else about which you want to be aware. So that is all done by the Federal Reserve in an attempt to cool off where things are right now. And the market never likes that. And I'm speaking specifically of the stock market right now, never likes those kinds of things because of the uncertainty in the near term that it provides. But what I can say to you with absolute conviction is we have been here many, many, many times before. This is 27 years, if you can believe it, of me doing this. So I've seen this a number of different times in the cycle end of things, and it never feels good anytime that we're going through it. It never is a pleasant kind of experience. But what we do know is, like waves on the ocean, that this will cycle out. Just in the same ways when the markets were at those peaks there in the third, coming into the fourth quarter of last year, we knew that that couldn't sustain. And you heard us say that as well, where we said this is wonderful, but not sustainable. In the same ways that that wasn't sustainable, just like when you're in the trough end of things, neither is that sustainable either, even though at times it can feel that way. Certainly we would like for it to be sustainable at the peak. Can't happen, unfortunately. It is not sustainable in the trough, which we all like because we don't want to be in the trough for too long. The next very understandable question that comes up very quickly is, well, how long until we get there? No way to know. This is a little bit of a different experience in terms of the last 2 cycles, like I described, because of where we are in an increasing interest rate cycle and higher inflation. Not that we haven't been here before, certainly, But it's been a little while since we have been, so this may take a little bit longer to cycle out as the market readjusts a little bit to where we are. So we're expecting for us to bump along here for the balance of this year. Anything is possible, certainly, and as we get into the Christmas retail season, that may be a positive indicator for the markets as well. The market probably will move a little bit based upon midterm elections in November, but that tends to be a temporal kind of thing. And so we expect to bounce along. We expect for positive days, we expect for negative days, but not a whole lot of material change short of some very dramatic kind of geopolitical event at this point. So it's an endurance test. It's the kind of thing through which we need to get through and get to it on the other side. As always, though, if you would like to review where things are for you or talk about things with a little bit more specific detail as where things are right now, and to take a look at the kinds of things that we see going forward insofar as your space is concerned, you know, I always enjoy hearing from you, always enjoy chatting with you about where things are. And if you'd like to share about, what your summer has been, especially as we're, I know, you can believe it, rapidly approaching Labor Day here, to talk about where you've been, if you had a chance to travel or spend time with friends and family, I certainly enjoy hearing about that as well. If you're a football fan, we're getting back into it. College, professional, we're already into preseason on the professional end of things. It's going to be back, and I am a football fan, so I really enjoy this time of the year. But always, friends, feel free to reach out with your thoughts or your questions. I always enjoy hearing from you, and until the next time, I'll look forward to talking with you soon.